Hey folks, I'm Allison. Welcome to my booktube channel. Today we are doing the mid-year freakout tag. I'm gonna check in and tell you a little bit about how my reading year is going so far and what my hopes are going into the second half of the year. The best book that I have read so far this year is definitely The Dutch House by Ann Patchett. I absolutely loved it. I gave it 10 out of 10 stars. It is a beautiful story of two siblings over the course of most of their lives, starting from when one of them is a teenager and the other is a small child, and moving through the death of the older sibling, and the younger sibling is maybe in their 60s. But it's so heartbreaking and beautifully told. Ann Patchett is an amazing writer. She has such a stripped down writing style, but yet manages to communicate so much depth and beauty in the surroundings. And the book is a really beautiful meditation on the passage of time and memory and the significance of events changing over time. There's this really lovely repeated imagery of the two siblings after they have been ejected from their beautiful childhood home. They return and sit in the car across the street and look at the old house. And when they start parking there, they are reminiscing about their childhood. But by the end of the book, they are going back to that spot to reminisce about their lives and about all the good times essentially they had sitting parked in that car and just having these deep conversations with each other as brother and sister. So I absolutely loved that book. It was completely stunning and I would definitely recommend it to anybody. The best sequel I've read this year, I don't think I've read any sequels this year, so I'm gonna have to skip that one. A new release that I haven't read but I want to, I have back here a bunch of new releases that I am planning to get to in the fall. I think I'm gonna do a sci-fi reading themed fall because there have been so many wonderful sci-fi and fantasy books released recently that I have been really excited to read. So I think definitely The Devils by Joe Abercrombie is one, and Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by B.E. Schwab is another. If you're into sci-fi and fantasy, definitely keep an eye out for my fall TBR and wrap up. Both of those are going to be very sci-fi and fantasy focused. My most anticipated release of the second half of the year, okay, this is probably not true. I am going to manifest out into the universe that we will be getting Alecto the Ninth sometime this year. I know that that is probably an unrealistic hope to have, but keep your fingers crossed with me because that is my most anticipated upcoming release, full stop. And we don't know when it's coming out, so who's to say not later this year sometime. My biggest disappointment this year, I think maybe was Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. And I say that not because it was bad, it was very, very good. I rated it 8 out of 10, pushing 8.5. But after all of the hype that I had heard about that book for so long, you know, it winning the Man Booker Prize and the New York Times ranking it 3rd on their list of the best books of the century, I thought that book was going to blow my mind, and it ended up being sort of just fine. So if you're interested, you can check out my in-depth review and reading vlog of reading Wolf Hall. I really liked it, but I think it's overrated, and I really had such high hopes that I thought it was overall kind of a disappointment. My biggest surprise of this year was definitely Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I really thought that book was going to be like an overhyped Instagram, TikTok book that people mostly liked because it has this beautiful vibey cover, but it was amazing. I can't say enough good things about it. It was both so cute and vibey and cozy and aesthetic, and also had such interesting meditations on the way that we spend our time and the value of our time and the importance of our perception of events and our own sort of experience living through those events. And even when our experience and perception can't actually change the events, it was so touching and like very heartbreaking at moments and very heartwarming at moments. And, in the book's like this long, it was really a pleasant surprise. I read it early in the year and it was my first 10 out of 10 review for the year. And it was such a pleasant way to kick off my reading year. My new favorite authors, there's definitely two that I discovered in the first half of this year that I am really excited to read more from the second half of this year. The first is Ann Patchett, who wrote The Dutch House, and I have already picked up Tom Lake, which is another book of hers that I'm very excited to read. And the other is Rachel Cusk. I read The Second Place in maybe March and really enjoyed it. So I went and picked up Outline, which is the first of the Transit trilogy, and I'm really excited to read that too. A character that I have a crush on, that's a hard one. I'm not a big crushing on book characters person. Maybe Sylvia from Intermezzo. I read Intermezzo by Sally Rooney at the beginning of the year, and I did an in-depth review of Intermezzo as well that you can check out if you're interested. I really like Sally Rooney. I've read all of her books, and I really liked the character of Sylvia. I thought she seemed very like beautiful and well-dressed, which is, fun and aesthetic. All of Sally Rooney's main characters tend to be beautiful and well-dressed, but I also thought she just seemed like a very interesting person to have, over to dinner. And she and Peter, her sort of main love interest in the book, had really fun, deep, meaningful academic conversations, and sort of did all this like sort of theorizing as they like walked around campus, and that seems like a nice life. Like I could imagine going on a little walk around campus and having thinking big thoughts, and also I think she's a really good cook. I don't think any books have made me cry so far this year. I'm not a big crier. It takes a lot for a book to make me cry. But I definitely thought that Lost Cat by Mary Gaitskill was very sad. It talks about the relationship between it's a sort of memoir, like a bit of a memoir. And it talks about the relationship between the author and this lost kitten that she brought home with her from Italy and nursed back to health, and then the kitten gets lost and, is probably dead. And also the the author is using that experience as a way to like process emotions she has with a very complicated relationship she has with these two children that she is sort of in a pseudo foster kind of parental relationship with. They came and stayed with her and her husband several summers as part of a sort of program to get students from cities into nature and into the country. And she develops a strong relationship with these kids, but they have a really difficult home life situation, and also the sort of distance between their regular life, their sort of socioeconomic situation and the sort of dire straits that they're often in and their family is often in, compared to her very, white, comfortable, middle-class life. She finds it quite difficult sometimes to like connect across the communication divide. And I thought that book was really quite heart-wrenching. It dealt with some really interesting, tough issues, and did so in a way that I thought had a lot of heart, and I really enjoyed it, but it was really sad. A book that made me happy, I've been reading some poetry recently. I picked up a book of poems by William Carlos Williams at a little free library, and I really love poetry, so maybe that is a book that has been making me happy. The most beautiful book that I bought this year is, like, there's absolutely no question, no competition. It is The Backyard Bird Chronicles by Amy Tan. In this book, Amy Tan has done these absolutely amazing, beautiful illustrations of the various birds that she sees in her backyard, and they're all throughout the book, and they're just completely stunning. So definitely this is the most beautiful book that I have bought so far this year. I don't think there are any specific books that I need to read by the end of the year. I tend to sort of go through reading cycles where I'll set aside a few books that I want to read, and once I get through them, I'll sort of have a think about what I want the next sort of batch to be. But I'm not too strict about it. I like to leave myself a lot of flexibility to sort of pick things up as they, as I see them or as I hear about them. And so I think for this, I'm just gonna point you in the direction of my summer TBR video with all of the books that I have on my list to read in July and August. So you can see the things that I have coming up in the immediate future. And then the last question is any reading plans for the year ahead. And I don't have any concrete plans, but like I said, I think I'm feeling a sort of sci-fi fantasy fall. I have these books. I'm definitely going to be reading Blood Over Brighthaven, The Devils, and Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil in the fall. So I'm looking out maybe for some other sci-fi fantasy books that I can add to that list. Because I feel like, spooky season is kind of a fun time to be reading some like darker sci-fi fantasy books. Okay, so that's all I have for you. That is my mid-year freak out tag check-in video. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to hear more from me, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you so much for spending some of your one wild and precious life with me watching this video.